Welcome, broadcasting to the entirety of the Super Smash Bros. Community. This is Beyond the Metagame. I'm your host, Peon, this week live from a local tournament near you. I'm joined, as always, one of my co-hosts, AV. How's it going, big boy?
Yo, are you hopped up on something? Are you okay, man? You came in a little quick there.
Do I sound? I'm a little juiced, man, because this week is a good episode, man. I'm feeling juicy.
I think I know what it is. I think it's like we're at the local tournament. I think you've been juicing something else. I think you've been taking some Addy or something. Like
wait. We're 40 seconds into the show and you're making drug accusations, AP?
I mean, You've done worse.
You know what it is, man? I've been playing a lot of Rivals of Aether recently, and that game's a little faster paced. Maybe that's why you're hearing a sort of urgency in my voice today.
Yeah. It is super fast paced. Really fun game, honestly. Like I've had a lot of fun playing it. I mean, Claren, the sword fighter, and I think you like the beetle dude, right? You like
the beetle dude. His name's Crag. I don't play John Lennon. Okay, this isn't okay. His name is Crag, and he is a glorious character. I agree. As the episode title says, and as mine and Davy's conversation would show you, today we have Dan Fornace on, the creator of Rivals of Aether, or Aether. Is that like a tomato or tomato thing, or is it just Aether?
I think the official word is pronounced Aether, but it's been pronounced both ways in the Americanization. So we're not really sure at this point.
In this interview, which we probably should have asked Dan while we had him on, he is kind of the Bible of Rivals of Aether lore, I guess. It's like, if you forget how to pronounce the name Jesus, and all of a sudden you're talking to God, and you forget how to ask, is it pronounced like Jesus or Jesus or Jesus? And I feel silly now.
Yeah, it's okay, man. There's actually a lot of Latin words that are like this, like daemon versus demon, like Daemon. Like, and then people still say demon even though the A's in there. So I think
is Aether a Latin word?
I think so. I'm pretty sure it's somewhere in there.
Okay. Well, regardless, this week we do interview Dan and kind of uncover a lot of behind the scenes aspects of game design. Rivals, if you don't know, and you probably do if you're listening to a Smash Brothers podcast, is a very popular platform fighting game. It's a game you've heard AV and I recommend it on the show in the past, especially before Ultimate came out. I talked about how I was actually incorporating Rivals into my training routine just to kind of pin down some platform fighting game fundamentals. I was playing some Melee, I was playing some Rivals, I was playing some Smash 4. And it's a game that I've continued to play with kind of to accompany my love, which is Smash. And I don't think that Rivals, to call Rivals like a side hoe, you know what I mean? It would definitely be a disservice to the quality of game that it is. It's a fantastic game that both stands on its own two legs and happens to accompany Smash. A lot of locals, you'll see people playing the game. And there's a lot of crossover in the Smash Brothers and Rivals of Aether communities. So I'm really excited that we, have a chance to have him on the show, AV.
Yeah, it's a really unique perspective that we get, especially from someone who has gone through and tried to recreate a lot of the same mechanics that we observe in our favorite platform fighter. And it's awesome to hear what goes into like making game feel like Smash and appealing to mostly the Smash crowd. And I think that as Dan says himself, like he goes on to say that he's like a huge Smash fan, so you can observe all of his thoughts and how it informs like creating this thing that creates this wonderful bridge between maybe some of the games that in the Smash series that we wouldn't have played otherwise.
Yeah, no, absolutely, man. I think you summed it up very well. So all that and more in just 1 second. Welcome back to Beyond the Metagame. This week, AV and I are so happy to be joined by Dan Fornace, creator of Rivals of Aether, a very popular platform fighter. Dan, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, happy to be here.
So I want to kind of cut right to the chase. Rivals, since its inception, has had a pretty tight knit relationship with the Smash Bros. Community. Every Smash local I go to, week in week out, there seems to be a dude with a laptop in the corner playing Rivals. It's a different dude every time, but he's always playing Rivals of Aether, and it's this awesome kind of, I don't know, coexistence between the Rivals community and the Smash community. Was that intentional with the inception of Rivals? And do you have a history with Smash?
Yeah, so I think one of the reasons we're at a lot of stuff more than some of the other platform fighters that have popped up is because I did come from like competitive Smash. That's kind of what got me into like I was kind of already obsessed with Super Smash Brothers before I knew that there were tournaments, but then like going to compete is what kind of pushed it over the level. And then once I started making games, I've pretty much been making all Smash style games. But I got into the tournament scene when I was in college, uh, around like 2008, 2009, playing Brawl actually, because that's what was the big game at the time. Like there was a short time period where like Melee kind of went away for a little bit, and Brawl was like the big game for 2 years. Um, and then when Melee kind of picked back up steam, I was like finishing college. So basically, Rivals came about because I really love Melee, but I was never good at it. It was kind of hard. So Rivals is my attempt at making an easier version of Melee so I could be competitive and also get to Wave Dash.
Yeah, that's actually really incredible because one of the things I love about Rivals, and I think especially Brawl, Smash Four Ultimate players can relate to this, is you're watching Melee. Say you're a lifelong fan of Smash, and you tune into Melee tournaments, and you're like, wow, like Mango's Falco can really move a little bit. Then you pick up the sticks, and it looks like a completely different game when the pros play it and when you play it at home. Um, but Rivals, the moment that you play it for the first time, you have access to the advanced techniques that are pretty far up the skill curve in Melee. There's no L canceling, wave dash and wave landing is made a lot easier. There's nothing to worry about like chain grabbing and ledge hogging. A lot of the less fun aspects of the competitive Melee metagame, Rivals seems to either make super easy or just not even include into the game. I'm super kind of interested hearing that was an intentional part of it. And like, do you think that Rivals fits in? Like, do you think Rivals is for people that don't like Melee, or that aren't like amazing at these advanced techniques of Melee, or are you trying to market it towards like Melee players? Hey, here's another game similar to Melee with high hit stun, reliance on combos, that sort of thing.
Yeah, so I think when first developing Rivals, a lot of the decisions were kind of twofold. Um, the first kind of thing that influenced the design was it was intended to be like a lot smaller than it is now. Uh, I started it in like 2014, so I was not planning on still working on it in 2019. This is 5 years later. Um, so a lot of things like the no shields and the no grabs were kind of to simplify the mechanics and be able to create characters without having, because every new animation you add, it starts to compound the more characters you get. And then some of the stuff was based on just from my experience playing competitive Smash. So, like I said, I played Brawl. I was not a fan of ledges in general at all, or ledge stalling, or anything like that. Played against a lot of Meta Knights, so I got to see how abusive, ledge invincibility can be. Um, and I actually made a fan game before I made Rivals called Super Smash Land, where I simplified a lot of things. And one thing I had was just no ledges. Um, so those ideas kind of merged in. And a lot of what makes Rivals unique now actually came about after playing it and realizing we needed something else. So initially, when I first was beta testing Rivals before it was even on early access, there was just no ledge. And if you couldn't make it to the ground, you just died. But but that made certain recoveries way too good, and then certain recoveries like Zetterburn, who has basically foxes, his was really bad. So we added a system where every character can wall jump once, unless you get hit or unless you touch the ground, and then you can wall jump out of your up B or out of your fall state. So that kind of, once we put that in, it mixed up the recovery game a lot, and we just kind of kept running with that. But it was never like an original intent, like way back in the early design docs. I never said like, oh, we're gonna let you like wall jump, and there'll be this cool recovery system where you like have to try to get to the wall, and the guy can either stop you there, and then eventually you have to hit ground, and the guy can try to stop you there. We just kind of developed it over time once we had like players actually playing it.
Yeah, it's really neat that like you had this one iteration of Super Smash Land to kind of like figure out, okay, what are the problems with trying to create like melee or create like a smash in like a smaller environment, and then you were able to iterate on that, basically say, okay, these are the things that we can use to make my game unique and have it stand out. And in that vein of thought, where do you think Rivals stands as its own game? Because there's always this beautiful mutualistic connection with the game, but is in the theory of marketing and eventually like seeing this game succeed as a unique thing, where does it stand alone from Smash in the game ecosystem?
Yeah, so that's something that we're starting to move on to now. A lot of it like behind the scenes as we're kind of trying to finish up Rivals and get it on Switch. But one of the things we are working on is where do we go from here, and like what do we kind of want to do with both Rivals, and then also just like the brand itself. So one thing that we've been doing is kind of just expanding the world and really pushing our characters to be kind of what makes us stand out. I know in, for example, like Street Fighter, a character like Ryu has now been in Smash and he's been in other games. That's what we kind of want to get with our roster, where you start to recognize these characters and you see them in other places. So April Fool's Day this year, we released a game called Lovers of Aether, which is like the dating simulator for Rivals. And even though it was like a joke game, and we put it out on April Fool's for free, and you can just get it on Steam, and it's not like canon in the sense of like the lore is completely different because they're in like a modern day high school, and they're all teenagers. But it is kind of like a hint at kind of what we want to do, where we know that Rivals itself is like a very competitive uh, type of game, and like not all gamers want to like go online and do a tutorial and then get destroyed by people for like hours on end in 1v1 matches. So we do want to start having other experiences kind of in the world to kind of build it. And then also just hopefully do more with Rivals 2 going forward. Well, not Rivals 2, but do more with Rivals, that type of gameplay.
Right.
And get to expand and even add more characters. One thing I like to do is when I first started Rivals, all the characters were kind of based on like a moveset idea I had first, where I was like, I really want to do this character that can like teleport and use puddles and a bunch of other stuff, which was based on Vaporeon that I did in that Game Boy fan make I made a while ago. So like that was how I started like a lot of the characters. But then as we moved on, one of the characters we did late was Sylvanos, which is like our wolf zoner character who can put grass down and everything. And that character was actually kind of reversed, where I knew I wanted to make like this forest deity basically. So then we designed a moveset based on a character instead of, doing the moveset first and then making a character to match. And that's something that we can do more and more as we like get more characters in the world and we start to tell stories that people actually care about. It'll make the characters more valuable because if you had a cartoon where you were watching a bunch of characters and then you played a game with them, you would be more attached than if all the characters were brand new. And that's kind of what we had to do with Rivals 1. But then in the future, hopefully we can like have more established characters when we go to compete against Smash in like a more direct, because right now we're definitely like Smash's little brother kind of scenario.
Mm-hmm.
But eventually I'd like to see a world where, like Rivals, and it's like closer Mortal Kombat to Street Fighter than like we are to Smash right now.
Right. Well, I'm very intrigued that so naturally, we started talking about the characters of Rivals. To me, that is the strength of Rivals. That's what I love about it. Even you know, eh, when I've seen people see Rivals for the first time, they're like, "Oh wow, who's this? Rock beetle guy that throws rocks?" And oh yeah, Maple is this swings around on vines, and it's really kind of the strength of Rivals, which is interesting because you look at Smash Bros, right, and their roster is entirely made up of characters that derive from another game, and the Sakurai and his team have to adapt that character's kind of universe and play, personality into a move set. Do you think that there are advantages from your perspective of creating a character like you were saying you did with Orcane and from Vaporeon? Do you think that that's an advantage from a creator's perspective? Like, hey, look, we don't have to adapt this from a game. Whatever moveset we think is cool, we can implement and then make a character around that.
Yeah, I definitely think there are advantage. I think there's pros and cons to both sides. And now that we actually did two guests, we did Ori from Ori and the Blind Forest, and then Shovel Knight. We did get to see kind of both sides of it more. I think one of the nicest things about doing it moveset first is one, you get to kind of fill a void in your roster. When we made Maple, for example, she was the sixth character, and there wasn't really like a fast, grounded character that we had yet. Raster was kind of like our other rushdown character at the time, and he's more aerial, super light. So we knew we're like, hey, I want to make a fast rushdown character. I want her to be super quick on the ground. Um, I knew she was going to be the earth element, so I had a couple ideas. Like initially, in her first design, she was like going to be an item based character, kind of like Peach, where she was like picking acorns out and holding them and throwing them. But then once that was like her first design when I had only designs laid out. And then as I realized that I wanted her to be rushed down, I kind of pushed her towards that direction. And one of the nice things is once we knew we wanted her to be this fast character, then I was doing the visuals for her. So then you're like, okay, what animals would you pick to be like a fast, grounded character? And she ended up kind of like a ferret, squirrel, raccoon hybrid thing. But if you look at her, she's like hunched over. She's got these blades on her hands. She's like very low profile. She actually kind of stands like Little Mac in the new Smash games. She just looks like she's going to be fast, and we were able to do that because we were filling that void as opposed to trying to like take a character in who like already had properties and like make them fit because you might not be able to like match it.
Yeah, that's really cool in the sense that there's a lot of ground to be filled. Like you have this canvas that's kind of partially filled in different places, and you can kind of have this like bespoke like artistry to it where you can like fill in the holes of your own game. But as many game designers, I assume like you, they come to a point where this canvas starts to become a little too full, and ideas don't necessarily come naturally from trying to fill in holes, and your roster is actually quite diverse. You feel like everyone feels represented in terms of play styles. Is Does there become a point where adding a character is worth it because there's this marginal utility of adding a new character to a game? And does a fighting game need a ton of characters to be good?
Yeah, I mean that's something we definitely have thought about more as we're at 14 characters now, and that's our stopping point. We're not adding any characters past Shovel Knight when we put him in last year, but I've definitely thought about that a lot because especially when Ultimate came out, it's amazing that like when I first started playing Ultimate, even though it has like the most characters in like any fighting game ever, it felt like it had less characters to me than like Brawl or Melee does. Um, And I don't know if it's like the engine in that like the characters kind of feel more similar to play in the way some of the universal mechanics work, or if it's just like yeah, you have so many that like they all a lot of them fill similar roles. So you're like okay, I could play any of the Fire Emblem characters, for example, and fill a similar role when I'm mixing up with playing friendlies.
Yeah, that's actually such an interesting point because the roster is so homogenized in Smash Ultimate. Things like the universal jab lock, and yeah, I don't know what else it is about it. Maybe there are just a lot of characters for each archetype. When someone sits down and they're like, okay, who's Lucina? I'm like, oh, she's a sword girl. And, okay, well, who's Marth? We're like, well, he's a sword guy. It kind of becomes a little convoluted, where it seems every roster spot in Rivals, while it is a much smaller roster, every roster, um, character seems to be more justified. Okay, yeah, this is the beetle guy who throws rocks. This is the fox who puts people on fire. There's not really too much overlap. Um, is that a challenge going forward, like preserving that sort of purity in the roster? Is that kind of a tentpole design choice going forward in all iterations of Rivals, or is that just kind of the consequence of the limitation of indie game design?
Well, I think it's funny because Rivals, we've like put ourselves in a good place where I think if we did like want to do some more standard ish characters, like more straightforward, they would actually fit like really nicely into Rivals. We saw that a bit when we added like Claren and Rano, who I said before we released them were kind of like our melee character pack. In that Rano is a little bit like Sheik and Claren's a little bit like Marth. But even just Claren being added, she's basically a pretty straightforward archetype. She's a lot like Marth, where she's a sortie with a tipper, but just twisting the tipper ever so slightly and making it stun opponents as opposed to always just stronger knockback. And that opens up different combos at low percents if you can chain tippers together. That kind of created like a new uh, play style on a character that, when you look at like the base design, was a lot more conservative than other Rivals characters. So I think we've actually put ourselves in a place where we could have a good time just like doing some more conservative designs and just like getting them to like you don't want every character to be like Orkane or every character to be like Sylvanos and be like super complicated. So we definitely could fill a couple in and have fun with that. I think the big thing for us that we like to do to kind of make sure we're not uh, just creating this roster of everyone feeling the same is just looking to different games, and especially like games that aren't fighting games, for inspiration to make new characters. So a lot of the unique mechanics that you see on Rivals characters are actually taken from like League of Legends, for example. Um, that's where Raster's current, making him move faster inside of it. There's a character in League of Legends, Galio, who had a
Yeah,
mechanic like that at the time. Even Zetterburn, when I first wrote down him on paper, I just wanted to combine Wolf from Brawl with Brand from League of Legends. And the idea is
cool.
that you would light people on fire, and then when they were on fire, you were buffed. So instead of like stunning, like Brand had, you would KO them in Rivals. And that's something where I think you can keep going farther. We have like some high level designs on like what more characters could be, and like even something like we try to put characters in each element. So air had like we did wind for Raster, we did lightning for Absa, and then like a steam mech for Eliana. You could put something like sound into air, and then you could make a character that's like inspired by like a rhythm game where you have to like if you're doing things to a beat, then it's stronger than if you're like not doing it to a beat. And like obviously that type of character gets pushed towards that Sylvanos Orkane corner. So then you'd want to make some simple designs to balance it out. But I think we're in like a cool spot where we can kind of do both moving forward, and not really step on our toes. But yeah, I wouldn't want to be in a position where I had like 50 characters and 10 of them were all like Zetterburn like variations. I'd much rather have like 20 characters, but they're all feeling super different.
Dan, just hearing you talk about this, I'm like, man, this guy has the coolest job ever. Like,
Well, it's funny because the design part on characters is like super fun, and we do some high level design where you just get to like think up ideas, but then it ends up being such like a small percent of the actual game development in the end. Like even someone like Shovel Knight, we did actually work on the design for a while, just like iterating and talking to Yacht Club. But then like once we were completely locked in on the design, it was still like 6 months later, the character comes out and it's like a ton of work. So you're like, you hope you did a good job then, because if something that you loved, 6 months before, you might not love once you like finally get through it. So it is like a surprising amount of work, but the design part is definitely like some of the most fun pieces of making games, because you get to just blue sky think of like what would be cool.
Yeah, you kind of hit a lot of things that I really vibed with. I mean, when Peon and I have talked a lot about characters that we would have wanted to create, we very so often pull from League of Legends. Like I've talked before about like an Olaf like character that like throws axes and goes berserker mode on people, like refreshes like cooldowns of axes when he picks them up, and it's or like a Lucian s character, and the I think it's really cool that you're able to pull ideas from different universes and create these unique elements. And I especially felt that even as a Marth player from Melee, immediately gravitating towards Clarin, I felt excited to play Clarin, and I didn't feel like it was a complete clone of Marth. I felt like there were a lot of like really unique elements, and it was more straightforward for me to pick up. But I definitely felt like out of the other characters, this deserves its own spot, and I definitely vibe with that. Well, going forward, do you foresee are so I think you mentioned earlier that Ori and Shovel Knight are probably going to cap off the roster. So do you not foresee any more third party indie characters, or would you be open to like some further licensing with different indie games, because this kind of puts you in an interesting scenario where you have this like beautiful canvas to like to to showcase other indie games, or is this kind of it?
Yeah, so we've thought about that, and we actually did spend a while kind of researching and even contacting a couple different indies about our second guest, which ended up being Shovel Knight. So we did do like a couple early designs for some other characters, and I think one thing with Rivals is we've gotten to the point where even like little changes and adding characters and like adding mechanics to characters. Like right now, we're finishing up like the definitive, where we're putting in what we have like Abyss mode, which is like our single player mode where you get to like customize the moves a little bit, and doing it for the back 6 characters that we have took a lot longer than the first 8, because there's so many more interactions that you have to do. We added the character Ori, who has this bash ability, where she can like use bash and then send projectiles different directions, and that just wreaks havoc on like all the projectiles in the game, because they all have to be able to interact with it. So we're at the point where the code base has gotten quite large, so like any kind of little changes we want to make do have like ramifications. And then also the code base is just getting really old too. It's 5 years old and it's in GameMaker. We started in GameMaker Studio 1. We migrated it all over last year so we could kind of get ready to go on Switch. And we're still doing changes to the netcode to make it actually function, the online function on Switch. So we're at the point where we kind of want to just like wrap it up and then like move on. So if we did do like something else with Rivals type gameplay, I just feel like we'd want to go onto a new engine and be able to start from scratch, and just kind of take the stuff that we know we really liked from Rivals and kind of merge in maybe some stuff we didn't have a chance to do, either because of time or because we just wanted to be different, and even some new ideas in terms of general mechanics. And I think the big thing for that is just because we've just been on this game for so long that we just want to like yeah, wrap it up.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that. I haven't worked on anything for 5 years. I mean, I've been doing this podcast with AV for 7 months, and I'm almost ready to throw in the towel. But I want to wrap up one quick question on your characters, and like there's this phenomenon that I've kind of noticed. Well, okay, I'll back up. It was Genesis 5. Rivals had appear. I think did you commentate top 8 with EE in Rival Genesis 5 in that big Oakland theater?
Yep.
Yes, and it was that day. So on my way down to Genesis, it was like a 6 hour drive for me. Me and my carpool played Rivals in the laptop the whole way, and there was some of the people in the carpool's first time with the game, and we watched all top 8, and Rivals was just such a fun part of that whole thing. Like even just the music filling up that ornate theater was so cool, especially when contrasted by the Smash 4, which followed Rivals top 8 with all of, like the meh, 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 like Animal Crossing KK slider music. It was a really great experience, and as we are walking out of the top 8 for after Smash Melee wrapped up, we were kind of reflecting on who's everybody's favorite character in the Smash franchise, and everybody started listing characters, and then the conversation got to the point where everybody was pretty much just saying that their favorite character to play was their Rivals of Aether main, and Rivals of Aether main, and that's kind of the funny thing. Like people love the characters in Rivals. My boy is Crag. I love Crag almost unconditionally. If he got put into Smash Ultimate, that would be my favorite character to be added. What's the secret? Like, why does everybody like Rivals characters so much? Like what is it about them that makes them so distinct from characters in other platform fighting games?
Yeah, so that's something that we've heard a lot of. Like, they would love to see their favorite Rivals character like put into Smash, um, which is like a part of the reason why I was saying like we would want to move on to a new engine, because it would be nice to like take these characters and kind of have some more universal mechanics on top of them. Just make it more like fully flesh fighting game. Uh, but I think part of the reason the characters resonate with people is one, just that they're like so different that they kind of each have like their own shtick that they get to do. Like Claren being so focused on like her tippers. I think she would fit super well, like just dropped into like PM or melee or ultimate, because she would fight a lot differently than like say Marth or Roy. So like that's one part of it, and then the other part is we just tried to make like designs, like when we were designing visuals for characters early, like I kind of had this like rough idea that I wanted every character to be like Avatar the Last Airbender combined with Star Fox. So like every character would have like some kind of like animal silhouette and then also be the element. So visually we just wanted to make them all different, which I have learned in Rivals it makes it so like people gravitate towards like some characters, but then it also makes them like really gravitate away from other characters. So someone who might have even liked a character like Absa, in terms of her gameplay, just because of her like silhouette and the way she looks and moves, she's like kind of more Zelda, like stand upright, standoffish. They like wouldn't play her. Um, so it is like a double edged sword, but we definitely did try to like push all the characters to fit their gameplay archetype and then also like resonate with people who like that type of style.
Okay, I mean that makes total sense, and it does lend favorably for lovers of Aether, like you mentioned previously. Then how mad would you be if after putting all the work into Rivals, like Lovers of Aether became like the next, like it became so much bigger than Rivals ever. Like Lovers of Aether just completely eclipsed Rivals. What would be your reaction to that?
Well, we joked about that before because since we were putting it out for free, and we really had no basis. Obviously, it was like a shorter game, but we did spend like a good amount of time. It probably took like 4 months from beginning to end, and then like I was on it like off and on. I was obviously working on Rivals, but then did a lot of work for like kind of the last month on it. Um, I would think it would be amazing. Like I think it's hilarious. I actually really love how Lovers turned out. Like if you play through it, Like, I actually, a lot of people think that I wrote like all the dialogue because it's very, if you like follow me on Twitter, like Lovers is very much like in my sense of humor. Some of it's actually honestly past like what I joke about. It goes even further. But we actually did work with a team. We worked with Justin from ASCIIsoft, he just released Katana Zero. So some of his team, they're like, they were like a small SWAT team of game developers, came in and they wrote all the dialogue and kind of just based it on some of the characters, honestly, in Lovers are just based on inside jokes from the Rivals community. Like Rano, for example, we released a trailer for him at Super Smash Con. Wow, like almost 2 years ago now. But when we revealed him, all we tell you is that he's like the poisonous pacifist. That's like all it says on screen. And then we just show you a combo reel of him beating people up for like a minute and a half. So like that immediately went viral where people were just like, he's the worst pacifist of like all time. Like he's just beating people up with his feet and his hands forever. So like that was a joke pretty much since then. And then when we told our team that that's a joke in Rivals, they just like went with it in Lovers. So like Rano is this like psychopath who just like talks about being a pacifist while also talks about kicking people's faces off.
Yeah,
That's pretty hilarious.
that's so
Um,
funny.
like one thing about Rivals, I think that distinguishes itself from the Smash franchise is that it's so clearly a competitive game, and perhaps that's just showing my biases, like my background in gaming. But you hop in, it gives you a tutorial, it tells you, hey, this is where this game can go. This is what your character is capable of doing. Do it. You, the creator of the game, very active in the esports side of things. Commentating a top eight. The competitive people know you. You're very much a part of the community. um, is this game for competitive players? Is it hard to kind of balance and to create a game that works both so well competitively without perhaps, you know, neglecting the casual player base? I imagine that most people that play games never have aspirations to compete in tournaments. As fun as much as I wish that wasn't the case. Do you ever feel like you haven't struck a balance between the casual or the competitive, or do the casual players benefit from the detail that goes into a competitively viable game?
Yeah, so that's something that we've thought about throughout development, but especially now as we're like kind of trying to wrap up Rivals and like we're thinking about what's next. I think on Rivals we did do like obviously yes it was competitive focused. Like I said, I played Brawl, so like if a lot of the features come from originally Smash, but then kind of catering to our community. So like when you play local and you turn on tournament mode, you have like stage striking built into the game. We have like a starter and counter pick system that you can do that I think we set right now, but for definitive, we're planning on letting players like adjust the list themselves so they can like decide their own starters and counter picks for their own tournaments. So we have like an online does the same where we have that as well. So we have like a lot of features that are geared to competitive, and even the tutorial honestly is pretty geared to competitive because a lot of it is to teach you the terminology that you might not have learned from playing Smash. So I've had people tell me that they've been playing Smash for 15 years and they didn't know how DI worked until they played the Rivals tutorial. So they finally could see it since we do like a little bit of visual to show you. Um, so even that is geared to competitive. I do think we're pretty lax and like not we didn't like ever go full in on getting the game to appeal to casuals. And I see that as a lot of the kind of like the negative reactions to the game. So like the two times I've noticed it the most was when we did a Humble bundle. We were in Humble Monthly a while ago for Steam, and then we just did Xbox Games with Gold right now. Um, so if you're listening to this when it's new, you can get the game for free on Xbox One. But we I see it because these players have gotten the game for free, so they're not, they hadn't really maybe they didn't even know about the game, maybe they only knew a little bit. But I do see some complaints online that like it's really hard to get into. The story mode is pretty lackluster. It's like pretty bare bones, and they did the tutorial, but like they go online and they still get destroyed. So like they felt like the ramp to have fun is like, especially if you're playing online, is like too great. Um, so that's something where, if I was going to do it again, I would think like, how can we make something that both players can enjoy? I look at a game like Mortal Kombat. For the past like pretty much 10 years, every game that they've done has done really well because they have this like elaborate story mode that's basically like a 6 hour movie about the characters, that you can play it on super easy. So even if you're just kind of a casual fighting game fan, you might pick up Mortal Kombat, beat the story mode, and then be done with it. But for you, that was, worth it to buy the game. And then somebody else might pick it up, um, and then play it only for competitive. And then the player you want is the guy who picks it up for the story mode and then kind of sees the other features and then becomes a competitive player. That's the kind
Yeah.
of thing that ideally you would want, as you want players to get into fighting games who might not have known they were into it.
Look, man, I think you just need to animate Crag ripping off Maple's head. Just like have Orcane just take out Maple's umbilical cord.
And swing it around and then hit her with it.
That's the secret.
but but yeah, like it does seem like this game was very much birthed from Melee, and it took all of the amazing things of Melee, maybe like shaved off the ramp of Melee. But I think that kind of goes to show you how ridiculous Melee's ramp was that even in like an attempt to create a version that was a little more smoothed out, it still is kind of daunting for maybe like the low casual entry to get in. But that being said, there's a lot of talk about how different platform fighters can inform decisions made in other platform fighters or improve skills that you didn't necessarily think you could improve in such a different game. For example, Mango has gone on record saying that there's certain parts of Smash Ultimate that have just significantly improved his melee gameplay. That being said, what can you say about people who want to use Rivals as a way to improve maybe at other platform fighters like Smash? And what are things that you've noticed that people have gone on during this cross pollination between players of both games?
Yeah, I think for that regard, like Rivals is a pretty awesome bridge game from like Ultimate to Melee. Like if you want to get into Melee, I would say like the two games to check out would be both Rivals and then Slap City. Slap City honestly is even a little bit closer to Melee, but the main reason being is that Melee, Rivals, and Slap City all have similar movement and like a lot of similar tech that you would see, but both Slap and Rivals have like a buffer system like you would see in Ultimate. So the inputs are not nearly as strict and like unforgiving. So like learning the wave dash in Rivals, you can do in a couple minutes. Like if somebody just tells you the input, you can learn it in like a minute or two. We even let you, not only is there a buffer, so it's harder to mess up, we even let you cancel the jump squat frames into air dodging. So you can literally just hit jump and air dodge at the same time in Rivals and hold completely forward because you're still on the ground, and you will get a perfect wave dash. Just you can do it even with a keyboard, just holding right and hit jump and air dodge. But once you get it and once you start using it well in Rivals, you can actually like bring that over to Melee, even though it's going to be a lot harder to wave dash, like especially on a character with a short uh, jump squat, like someone like Fox. You can still like take the tech and bring it, because when I haven't ever gotten really serious into Melee again. I just kind of play it for friendlies at tournaments. Um, but when I got back into Melee after working on Rivals for a couple of years, I did notice that like just like the way I was approaching the game was better. I play like Sheik in Melee now because one, I think she's the easiest kind of character to be pretty good with at like still a nub level, like a low tech, but you have good fundamentals, so you can play okay. And two, when I was playing recently, I was working on Rano, and I just always kind of liked Sheik's archetype. So I do think that Rivals is like a great bridge game to kind of get you into Melee. Um, but like they all kind of offer, all the games offer like their own kind of take on the tech and the movement. So they're all worth checking out, I think.
Yeah, that's pretty great. I mean, I have to agree with you that I think it fits really well. I mean, out incidentally that I think Rivals is its own experience. It positions itself against Smash really well, where it isn't quite Melee in terms of how difficult it is, and it does allow a lot more movement options than Ultimate, and it kind of I think it straddles itself well. There's like this phenomenon where Smash players start playing Rivals, and I notice that when people played Smash first, Rivals is just comes super naturally to them. Concepts like stage control and preserving your double jump and adapting to your opponent all cross over very well. Of course, you still have to learn the different matchups and different stages, and there's a lot to learn when you pick up Rivals. But there's a lot that intuitively carries over from the other games. Was this something in the design process that you considered? Is there something to say about preserving the fundamentals of like the platform fighting genre and making your game in accordance with those fundamentals?
Yeah, I think so. I think when making just platform fighters in general, before like Rivals came out on early access, like I think a couple months before Brawlhalla had just hit early access, but really before Rivals, there really wasn't like a serious competitive fighting like platform fighter genre. There was a lot of like platform fighters over time, ever since like Smash was on N64, that came out, but a lot of them were kind of tied to different franchises, and they were just kind of trying to jump on Smash's success, but they weren't necessarily too concerned about how it plays and whether it's a fighting game or not. They were just looking at Smash and emulating it. Um, and I think part of that is because when you just look at Smash, if you're not like I was super into the competitive scene, so I was like so deep into Brawl and a little bit of PM when that was getting big. But so I was like really into kind of the engine and the feel and the movement and how everything works in Smash. But I think like a lot of designers, like say who were making, trying to think back, like the Digimon Rumble Arena, for example, which came out in like 2002 or three, around that time, like soon after Smash. They weren't looking at like say like the frame data as much. They were just kind of looking at Smash as like the face value. And then once you get into the frame data, you start to realize that there are a surprising amount of things in there in Smash that are kind of core to the experience. That as soon as you start changing, um, the game feel starts changing, and it starts like you can make any kind of platform fighter you want. Like a game like Towerfall is a platform fighter, but it's completely different. Um, but just something as simple as like the jump squat and the land times on characters. Like if you basically had like a lagless jump, like a lot of platformers do when if you're just playing a single player one on Steam, that's going to instantly feel a lot different than how jumping and landing in Smash does. So when I was first starting out, as kind of a conscious effort, but also because I needed to learn honestly how the engine worked, a lot of things I was doing early, I was just taking from Smash, just straight up. I would go in. I had like an emulator at the time, and it was mostly Brawl, honestly, because I kind of missed the PM wave a little bit in that I moved to Seattle, and I moved away from college, so I didn't really have. I probably would have been super into PM if it was popular like a year or two earlier. So I was basing a lot of things on Brawl, but I was actually just straight up looking at some of their frame counts. So I would go in, I would jump, I would see how many frames it took for. I think I was basing it on Wolf at the time because I was doing Zetterburn. How many frames it would take to jump? How many frames like the initial dash was? How many frames the dash turn was? things like that, and just kind of taking the numbers over initially. Then I started researching Melee. I would compare numbers to that because obviously Brawl and Melee did have a different movement system. And then as time went on is when I started to tweak based on how I wanted the game to feel. Rivals, a lot of the recovery on attacks is shorter, and we don't have like a shield. So we have like systems to kind of balance around that. Like if you miss someone in Rivals, you actually end up getting more lag on your attacks, both in landing lag and on the attack itself, as kind of a replacement for L canceling. But all that stuff came later because initially I just needed to kind of learn how some of the systems worked. And it is funny because a lot of the things that ended up different in Rivals and some of the tech that's only in Rivals is not even on purpose. It's because I wasn't able to like actually recreate Melee or Brawl or any Smash game 1-to-1 in what I was doing. I kind of just, this is how I thought some of the systems worked. Like even some of the names they're misnamed because that's what I thought they were called. In Rivals, we call when you up special and you're falling, I call it pratfall, which is a different thing in Smash Brothers. But I always
Yeah.
called it pratfall when I was playing, like growing up. So there's a lot of stuff like that in Rivals where some of the mechanics are literally just what I thought how it worked. So now if I do go and make another platform fighter, I have an interesting task of taking the things that people like and that I like that was never really intended and combining it with like Smash in a way that it's still unique because like obviously you don't want to just make Melee again. There's kind of no point in that, even though it would be awesome, and I'm sure a lot of people would love to have just straight Melee again. Um, but like, yeah, taking what's good about both games and combining them when some of it is just uh, unintended side effects to like trying to make Melee in the first place.
Yeah, that's actually so hilarious. Like, in every creative work, there's always a little bit of, you always have a path forward, and then you look back after you're all done, and you've kind of veered off from your original route, and usually, uh, as a result, something great happened. Something unplanned and organic happened, and I could see as a game creator, going forward with a Rivals sequel or just continuing the Rivals franchise in general, how that could be a daunting challenge for you. How do you make sure to preserve that inorganic, or to preserve that organic magic, kind of put it in a bottle and hold it close. Um, and I wish you luck with that.
Yeah,
Um,
like some of the techs that are like most unique to Rivals are pretty much like all accidents. Like the one that people love, which I believe is actually also in Brawlhalla, and they would have to tell you if they did it on purpose, but I know that we did not do it on purpose. Is they call it hit falling in Rivals, which is basically when you're doing aerial and you land it. In Rivals, you can fast fall it during the hit pause,
mhm.
but like only during the hit pause. So you have to like basically as soon as you're hitting, you have to like start the fast fall, and then when hit pause ends, you'll be fast falling. So you can kind of that's really important on a lot of characters and Rivals to get combos with like their nair, for example. They basically hit a nair, fast fall, and then they can do another one. But that was a bug because basically how I programmed fast falling was I said if your vertical speed is 0 or higher, um, so like in Game Maker or in a lot of engines, like going up is a negative and going down is a positive. So I said if it's 0 or higher, you can fast fall. Um, Not thinking that when you're in hit pause, you're frozen, which locks you at 0.
Yeah.
So that means you can fast fall when you're in hit pause, and then hit pause basically takes your state and then restores it at the end. So it says, okay, it was fast falling. So then it does it. And that's something where I realized it eventually, obviously, but then I was like, well, this is kind of cool because a lot of combos are based on this. So we like just kind of left it. And that's like a lot of the tech that's unique to Rivals is that exact same thing where there was a bug. And then I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. So I guess we'll just leave it in the game.
Kudos for you leaving it in though, because it seems like a lot of games, they'll take out things that were unintended, even if the results were positive, like like speed cutting shortcuts and things like that. So good on you for just owning it and accepting that it was a happy accident. Very Bob Ross of you, Dan.
Yeah, happy little accidents.
Avi and I, were kind of reflecting before we had you on the show a little bit about the state of Rivals esports and how it contrasts the state of Smash esports, um, which is so dear to Avi and I, and it's a completely different game. You know, you are the guy. You know, your name is on the loading screen when it comes to Rivals. No one that plays Rivals fails to attempt to pronounce your name on boot up. You know, when you tune into a Rivals stream, there you are. It's the actual creator, very transparently talking about the game. You know, you'll interview players after tournaments, and you know they can look right in your face and say, you know, I think Crag needs a buff, man. Like, or, you know, your DMs are open on Twitter. People can just message you, say, hey, set a burn, make his F smash better, my guy, please. It's a really weird situation from the perspective of a Smash fan, where you know, the corporate entity of Nintendo is so impossible to communicate with, and we just kind of hope that they are paying attention. You know, hey guys, please notice us. Um, you know, are you happy with that state? Like, are there ever any unintended consequences with that kind of relationship you have with the community? And you know, how could that potentially like give comfort to the competitive Rivals player?
Yeah, so I definitely there's definitely pros and cons of being like so accessible. It is a bit better now that we have like a bigger team. So we have George, our community manager, who's also generally usually the guy next to me at the events. Like we do a lot of double commentary on stream when we had Genesis, for example. This last year we actually had 3 developers. So that helps in that now there's like more people. I will say, like being so close, I kind of go in waves of interaction, especially on something like Discord, where sometimes I'm like super active for like a month, and sometimes I'm literally like I don't even check the Rivals Discord for like an extended period of time. Like right now, I haven't even been too much in the Discord just because I have so much work that's not related to balance and kind of not related to community stuff that I'm like working on the netcode for Switch, for example, right now. So I just need to not get distracted by it. Um, but I did learn through early access development that like you can kind of get stuck in like a circle. I definitely spent like 2 to 3 months, like a couple years back, like before we full launched, just making like random changes and like chasing like different players' opinions and kind of talking to. We had like beta testers at the time, who's like a closed group, talking to them, seeing the reactions online, just interacting a lot online, looking online. Um, and like at that time, not a lot of progress in terms of like game features was getting done. And that's actually part of the reason. Uh, One, like I think Atalyst took a lot longer than some of the other characters to come out because we were already on early access. And then when we finally full launched, that also took a long time. And that's just because we were kind of building this active community. Like we were making skins for tournaments, and we were using that money to kind of fund pot bonuses at the events. So we're just kind of chasing a lot of stuff that's happening live. And you can kind of get sucked into it. But then on the flip side, like not like if you go, I think Nintendo has gotten a lot better from Smash 4 into Ultimate. So like when they were on Brawl, um, I can't imagine like anything that was ever posted on the internet affected Brawl's development in any way. But then, you know, Smash 4, they started to do the ballot. And then Ultimate, you can tell like they were watching the invitational that they had at E3, and like Bayonetta is still good. And then all of a sudden at Smash Ultimate comes out and Bayonetta's not good anymore. So we definitely know they're watching these tournaments. And they even, I saw for Ultimate in like the credits, there's Japanese professional players in there. So they've definitely started, they like recognize the scene. Um, but I think if you go back earlier to like Brawl and just like not recognize them at all isn't like the best path, because obviously I think the competitive fans would have wanted something closer to Melee instead of Brawl. And probably in terms of, you know, a competitive game, that would have been a lot better if they hadn't just kind of erased a lot of the stuff that made Melee interesting. Um, so there is like a balance you want to have, but I don't think like being 100% accessible is great unless like you have like a really good team where you can all like do that and still get work done. Because there is just so much. There's so much dialogue, and every time we add a new character is when I see it the most. Like we added Sylvanos and Eliana last year, and that's still a lot of the discussion, and a lot of it goes in circles, right? It's like, well, is Eliana's team too strong? Is Eliana too strong? Is Eliana the worst character in the game? Is this part of her moveset annoying, or is that part annoying? And you're just like, if you make a lot of quick changes, then you can just end up undoing stuff and redoing stuff. Um, so you do want to like take it and then go away, I feel like, and kind of work with our team internally. So right now, Trevor Youngblood, who's he's a programmer on Rivals, he's been doing a lot of the balance stuff for the last year, I would say. And a lot of our changes that you've seen on that we've done on Steam have been slower than they were in the past. And that's because we're just sitting on them longer and kind of making sure we know exactly what the problem is before we're like too trigger happy. Because when I was doing a lot of changes on early access, we did actually do stuff and then undo it like kind of frequently, which was like my fault because I was always trying to fix it. And there was like an inside joke about Forsburn's clone, because we worked with the beefy dudes in Europe and they did a bunch of patch notes for us. So like every patch, they had to talk about the changes I made because I was just trying to balance it because it was busted for so long. Just it's like imagine like Ice Climbers, but you get to just duplicate whenever you want. And how do you balance that? So I think we finally got to a good place, but I know I kept jumping around on what I wanted it to be.
Yeah, yeah, it's probably easy to kind of knee jerk sometimes, especially early on. I think I saw some tweet like that you made earlier about it's like, hey, I haven't checked the Rivals subreddit in a while, and then you go and you see I think like screw Rano or something.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, that I kind of respect that though, Dad. Like the thing. Well, not kind of. I do respect that because here you are. You've made the game. People like it. You know, if they're invested in the community, then you know you'd assume that they love the game or it means something to them, right? And you know, people are very opinionated. They have kind of entitlement. You know, the moment that you identify with something, it kind of becomes a part of you. And if you're a Rivals player, it's personal. You know, hey, I think Daedalus sucks. That makes me angry, you know. Uh, and you're so open to it, despite the fact that like you're responsible for the game that they love. You know, if I were in your shoes, I would feel a lot more like, guys, don't you try? Like, come on, I made the game, man. Like, I could handle it. I'm the reason we're here in the first place. So I definitely admire your humility and your willingness to open the floodgates in terms of the development process.
Yeah, I think it's funny too on Rivals where like I've never there's been like a couple times when sure like somebody like a certain cat not usually even a character usually like one specific thing about the character is just like too strong and we had to do something but generally throughout even from like day one of early access like there has never been like an agreed upon tier list among like even like the top 5 players in the game even if you just tried to make a small group so like players are always arguing and like that kind of helps in the sense that we never had to like even if someone comes to me and say hey Daedalus is terrible you need to buff Daedalus I'd be like cool did you watch Genesis 6 where full stream beat all the best players in the game is Daedalus when that was like a secondary for him like that he used Zetterburn and Daedalus and just like destroyed people so like I don't think there's like one character that's like too bad or too good. The times we have made changes have been like when we first released Ori, for example. The sidekick sign was pretty busted, and it kind of negated a lot of like interesting play. So then at that point, you're like, okay, like let's look at this. But we've never had to be like, I don't know. Even if the community keeps telling me like buff Crag or nerf Crag, that he's a very polarizing character because all the new people believe Crag is the best character in the game. And you know what? They might be right because when you first learn the game, Crag is amazing. But then all the tournament people are like, "Come on, Dan! Like, give Crag something. We go to all these tournaments and we never win. Like, give us something." And I'm like, "Well, there's 4 of you who made top 8. Like, one of you just needs to finish it and like get your shit together. I don't know."
Yeah, man. Hey, the people that think Crag isn't good have not fought my Crag. That's all I'm saying. But Dan, I don't want to keep you too much longer. You've already spent an hour with us. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. But I do want to ask you one quick question before you head out. Lovers of Aether's out there. I think we've all fallen in love with the Rivals character. Who are you taking to prom night?
From well, I think in lovers, since they are all like different versions of themselves, you can like different ones. Even though, so like Orcane is kind of like still my baby in terms of Rivals designs, just because I sat on that Orcane design, I think for 3 or 4 years before I even made Rivals. And then when I put him in and he was like pretty cool, I was like super excited. I was like, oh, I can make like so many other crazy characters now. That character kind of paved the way to like the weirdness that is Rivals.
Yeah.
Like once that character worked. And then it's funny because in Lovers, I think I also love Orcane just because if you played it, his story, he's like a prankster or whatever, and he's just like playing like childish pranks on the other characters. But then if you ask him out and you didn't it's like the way we programmed it is like you have to hit a couple points. You either have to like say something the right way or talk to them enough. So if you don't do it with Orcane, then he just like embarrasses you in this super elaborate prank, and it's honestly one of my favorite things in the whole game. Like I watched Pew Pew stream a Lovers playthrough, and he didn't like he just kind of talked to everyone, so he didn't like kind of meet many requirements. So he was just trying to ask people out, and then every time he failed, he reloaded his save. And when he got to Orcane, like the whole chat was just dying because Orcane just like he lets you know that you're getting rejected.
Avi, do you have a prom date in mind?
Claren. Like I think it's pretty clear for me. It's my main.
That's a good choice. I'm taking. I respect that.
I think
we did push Claren to be kind of the main character too in like the story, because when we first designed it, we was actually going to be even smaller than it was. It ended up being like it was pretty much only going to be about Claren, and then we were like, no, it's like a fighting game, so like you should be able to pick any character. So then like that's why Claren at the beginning she pushes the door open and she's like da-da-da-da.
She's definitely the waifu for me, I guess. I feel like it's that.
Look, I'm taking Crag. There's no physical attraction between me and Crag. I'm gonna get that out of the way. He's not my type long term, but I think he'd be a hell of a date. I'd love to spend at least one night with him.
Craig's great.
But Dan,
he's very soulful.
Right? That's what it is. It's the soulfulness. Dan, thank you so much for stopping by. I should tell you, due to your appearance today, you've actually qualified for the BTM Hall of Fame. That's right, a very, very, very elusive list. Your buddy G-Pick, famed Rivals commentators on there, as is most historical figures. Pretty much everybody around Mount Rushmore is there, and then right after that is you, Dan. So thank you so much for stopping by.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Before we go, where can people find you?
Mostly on Twitter, at Dan Fornace. You'll probably just see pictures of my dog and videos of my dog, but that's how you know it's me. That's what I'll be posting. And also sometimes Rivals stuff. And if you want to learn more about Rivals, just check out rivalsofaether.com. Hopefully we will have news about a certain Nintendo platform very soon. We've been teasing it for a while in terms of like if you've been following Rivals, but the main reason we haven't said anything is because we need to get that online working before we can be like, okay, like it's coming XYZ date. But once we get that completely good, we should be coming to Switch sometime.
Beautiful. I'll definitely be picking it up there. And hey, and it is on sale in Steam right now, both the base game and the DLC. And like you mentioned previously, Games for Gold on Xbox One is offering it for free as well, right?
Yep.
So check it out. Dan, thank you so much, man.
Yeah, thank you.
welcome back to Beyond the Metagame. AV, you and I just finished up our interview with Dan Fornace, and what a cool dude. I loved having him on. He's definitely one of the good ones. He was definitely such a humble dude, considering how much he's done in the gaming space and how much of an impact he's had on a lot of people in this community, ourselves included. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was really cool getting to pick his brain on like the inspiration for Rivals and understanding all of the emotion that went into each character was awesome in the sense that it gives each character in the game and playing the game so much more meaning. Like when I play Arcane now, like I'm going to like feel a lot of like the same things that Dan was thinking about when creating the character. I'm gonna start thinking of Arcane as like Vaporeon from
Yeah.
Pokemon, and I think that's so cool. And to get this perspective on why playing this game may like improve my other platform fighters is really going to motivate me to check it out and really get more in depth with it.
Yeah, especially when it comes out on Switch. I really hope that it really takes off because I think it offers a very complimentary experience to Smash. I mean that. I think it's similar enough to suck you in and different enough to keep you there and to keep you coming back. So I wish Dan and his team a bunch of success when they move on to the Switch. Um, and yeah, I definitely would encourage anyone listening to check it out because it's a great game.
Yeah, absolutely, man. That being said, you want to get into the questions for today?
AV, I do. I'll throw the first one at you.
Cool.
Community member Dapper Duck asks, "Hey guys, I know you guys mentioned that you two had a period where you would train each other in Smash and improve each other. In the future, Dapper Duck will be moving in with a roommate who would also like to get better in Smash. We plan on having some serious training sessions and matches. You know, since we will be playing against each other for hours, we'll eventually learn each other's play styles. What do you recommend we do to ensure we are improving instead of just playing the game with each other?"
Cool. I actually also want to hear your your side of this too, but my side of this is that I wanted to play with someone that was a massive tryhard, like, and Peon's about as much of that as he's more of a tryhard than I am probably, and that was so useful in that like I could is that like what I do with him is sometimes I'd say, "Yo, Peon, I want us to analyze every single move that we do, and I want you to every time that we make a mistake or every time like a unique interaction like happens, I want us to like stop, break it down, and understand it." And the thing is, not everyone is like that. Not you can't trying to do that with everyone is kind of difficult because you want them to actually enjoy playing too. But finding someone that fits your playing style is super important. So if you that being said, you kind of have this one roommate. You can't just force them to be however you want to be, but just kind of create this like mutual relationship of how you both want to enjoy the game. And if improving is like the main thing for both of you guys, awesome. Then going forward with that, it's like you have to understand that sometimes you're just going to be playing for not that seriously. You're just going to be having fun with it, and you're just going to be like talking about other things and just hanging out and having fun and improving as friends. And important, in my opinion, improving as friends and like just chilling and shooting the shit and just drinking brews is just as important because it builds a relationship with your training partner. So just make sure to set expectations with every training session and figure out what both of your guys' like styles are, and then make sure to not burn yourselves out by just always going super hard every single time.
Yeah, I really like. I think you summed it up pretty well. That's pretty much what I was gonna say. I will say that you should definitely designate time to practice. Like my psychology teacher in college, I remember he said, like, don't ever sit in the bed unless you're doing one of the two S's. Like, if you're not having sex and if you're not sleeping, do not be in your bed because it'll make both those two things more difficult. If you do a lot of work like homework or research, or you do stressful things in bed, like pay the bills, it can contribute to insomnia and to, I don't know, I guess an unhappy sex life. So designate time with your buddy that you're going to spend practicing. Sit down, have a serious mode for an hour. This hour a week or every couple hours in a week. There are going to be some times when you play with your buddy and neither of you are in the mood to put in the effort required to improve. And that's okay. You can still play casually with them, but definitely separate the times when you're going to improve and when you're just going to play and have fun. I think that's an important distinction to draw.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I think that's something that's really useful, because like you don't want to just sit down with your friend and just go like play for like 3 hours and say, wow, we just wasted 3 hours and didn't even have fun. So at some point, just cut it early and just say, you know what, you want to just screw around and play like stamina mode with ray guns. It's like it's like sure. Next question is from Ferris. So this episode, I think he was referring to the previous one, brought a question into my mind. Do you guys think that the clutch factor, aka the ability to clutch out a game, is a skill? And if so, how do you guys think you can practice it? Is it just staying calm in last stock, last hit situations? Is it grinding out your character techs until you have a reliable way of closing things out? Is it getting so good at mind games that you can outplay your opponent at any time? All of the above? Something else? What do you think, Peon?
The clutch factor. You know what? I'm gonna say something maybe a little controversial, maybe. I think the clutch factor is innate. I think some people just have it. It's like this X factor. I don't think you can teach true clutch. I think true clutch comes inherently, but you can improve in last stock last hit situations. If you're the kind of person that constantly loses games when they're super close, and you notice a pattern, well, I think there are steps to address it. Like trying to diagnose the problem. Am I thinking about the result of the match, or am I just continuing to focus on the actual gameplay, the actual moment, the actual process, until the match is over? A lot of people, they get in those situations. Okay, well, what if I win? What if I win? They psych themselves out. When I'm in those situations, I just try. When I catch myself thinking, I might win this or I might lose this, I deliberately try to reconfigure my thought process to, okay, how do I beat this character? How do I hit him? What habits has he been doing? How can I exploit them? What does he need to land to kill me? What do I need to land to kill them? And just really focusing on the nitty gritty process oriented gameplay interactions, and stop worrying about the result. I think you can train yourself to do that, but I think that like certain people, like look at HBox. I think clutchness to that level is something else, that you can't teach. What do you think, AB?
I'm tempted to go with your strangely fascist answer of
Fascist?
No, I'm kidding. That there's this superior group of people that
Oh,
that just have this innate clutch factor. And
okay.
and I mean,
I'm
I'm
not
just
saying that Mussolini's clutch. How is it fascist?
I'm just kidding, man. But I think to some extent it is innate, in the sense that there's some people who are more mindful. They're more, with lack of a better term, they're more introspective, and they can control their emotions and their feelings more. These people have an obvious advantage in these situations because they don't let invasive thoughts inform their in-game play or their physical twitches or their ability to have fine motor skills. These people will not have to work at it as hard. That being said, I do think, like you said, it's trainable. It, like, especially at the mid level, it's absolutely trainable to not miss things in high pressure situations. You have to put yourself in those situations as many times as possible. If you watch the King's Speech, it's kind of like that, in the sense that people with extreme disabilities can overcome them and can become good at things that you didn't even think they had a possibility of being good at. But that being said, I agree, at the very, very highest level, like there's going to be people who are just innately clutch, and those people are like you said, like the H boxes of the world. Their ability to drown out any non-productive thoughts are just going to put them that much over the top.
That's kind of hype, man. That's kind of anime. the way you described that. Ultimate asks, what are your guys' favorite characters to play purely for fun? It might be a character that we don't think is viable or are very good with, but, who do we play purely for fun?
Me, it's Captain Falcon, like 100%. Absolutely Captain Falcon. This may come as no surprise, as this is kind of the default answer for most people. Everyone has probably had Captain Falcon dittos with their training partner, little brother, little sister, or anyone. Like it's probably one of the most fun dittos to play in every, I think, iteration of Smash Bros. That being said, my Falcon was decent in Smash 4, and I've been training my Falcon in Ultimate, but I would hardly say that it's tournament ready. But when I want to have fun and I want to just kind of blow people up, do crazy things, and just be able to go in like all of the time, it's absolutely him. What about you, man?
Dude, I want to have a unique answer. I do. But you know that if you and I were hanging out right now and we were drinking a couple brews, we'd be playing Falcon Dittos within like 30 minutes, right?
Absolutely,
like that's just kind of.
man.
So I have to say the same thing for all the same reasons. I'm sorry, Ultimate. I wish I could be cool and say, oh, I like Pac-Man, I like my boy Ultimate, but it just isn't true. Falcon's my for fun character, especially after having Fatality on the show. Like I think he's kind of re-inspired me as a former Falcon main in Smash 4. So yeah, definitely Falcon. But AV, that is all the time we have for this week. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for interviewing Dan with me. You were a fantastic interviewer, and just a pleasure to talk to all around. Where can people find you, my friend?
You are too kind to me. People can find me at Abhi Vaidyanatha. That's A plus my long Indian last name on Twitter. And where can people find the show and you, Peon?
So you can find this show at Beyond Metagame on Twitter. That's right, Beyond Metagame. The show you're currently listening to is called Beyond the Metagame, but Twitter doesn't quite give a damn. All right, there was not any room for the, so it's Beyond Metagame. You can find me at Peon_BTM. That's Peon_BTM. That's Bravo, Tango, Mike for all of you butchers. And you can talk to AV and I both in the Beyond the Metagame Discord. It's in the show notes below, and it's also on our website, beyondthemetagame.com. And you can support AV and I and the show, Beyond the Metagame, on Patreon. If you do so, you'll have exclusive access to our second show, Beyond the Metagame, where we talk about everything but Smash. The patrons kind of tell us what to talk about. And actually, AV, we have to publish an episode on that pretty soon here, man.
Mm-hmm.
So for all the patrons, expect an update soon, as well as a multitude of other Patreon rewards. And as always, thank you so much for listening. Goodbye. I don't know. That's gonna have to work. Today's episode was made possible in part by Patreon. Thank you to our supporters, BK Otter, Danderson, Deem Guy, Ferris, Grandpa Rem, Honk Lava, Minlo, and Ultima.